Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1984 creature feature film, Razorback. This is one that's been on my list to see for years, and I couldn't find it anywhere, not even Netflix DVD, which usually has a wonderful selection, and I can find just about anything. So I didn't want to buy this prior to seeing it, but finally, Shudder put it up, and I checked it out. So when I'm putting up this review, it is available on Shudder. Hopefully it stays for quite a while, because it is interesting. Now, this film has actually been compared, well, when it came out, at least initially, I'm sure since then, it's been compared heavily to Jaws. People were like, it's like Jaws, but on the land. And I see that. Like, yeah, I get that. It makes sense, but also quite different at the same time. So, like I said, 1984 Razorback, directed by Russell Mulcahy, who directed a lot of music videos back in the day. He also did Highlander, Highlander 2, The Quickening, Ricochet, The Shadow, yes, the Billy Zane film, Tales from the Crypt, a few stories, Tales from the Crypt, and Resident Evil Extinction. I think he's still working too, just doing a bunch of like show episodes here and there, like onesies of a bunch of different shows. So, still working. Written by Everett De Roche, who wrote scripts for Patrick, which, if you have not seen Patrick, I think it's still on Shudder right now. Definitely see that film. Really, really cool. Check that out. He also wrote Harlequin, Storm Warning, and Nature's Grave, which I have not seen those. And the film Razorback is actually based on a novel by Peter Brennan. Jeff Bridges apparently was initially considered for the role of Carl. I kind of would have liked to see that because, not that the guy who was Carl did a bad job, but Jeff Bridges as Carl, that would have been pretty interesting. I really would have liked to see that, but didn't happen. Apparently, Steven Spielberg was so impressed with what Mulcahy had pulled off here that he contacted him about how he achieved the effects during the dream sequence in the film, which I actually would refer to more as like the nightmare sequence. That sequence is awesome. I think that might be my favorite part of the film. It does look really weird and surreal and nightmarish, but also very beautiful. And in general, honestly, this whole film really does look beautiful. I think I have a note at some point where I wrote down that, I think it's at the end, that this film, for being a film about a giant killer boar, looks way better than it has any right to be honest. Because, you think about the story of what's being told here. And normally that's going to be handled in a very kind of like whatever way. It's not going to get like the high class visual treatment that Mulcahy gave it. So I mean, kudos, bravo. It's very visually pleasing to watch, I will say. The animatronic boar was $250,000. So remember, this is 1984. So with inflation, whoa, it's a lot of money. But they overall used 6 different boars in this for different types of shots. But the animatronic one was the most expensive at $250,000, which shouldn't be a surprise to anyone because animatronic stuff is always more expensive. Um, the opening scene with the setting sun looks stunning. I'm going to say things look very great numerous times throughout this because it just looks so good. The color in the sky and the shot selection are great in the beginning. Also, something that is done numerous times throughout the film, seeing like an interesting color in the sky or just having like really strong backlighting to a scene and then seeing what's going on and the things on the set as just mainly silhouettes. Very, very cool. Looks stunning. Looks wonderful. Love it. And I love that they start the film like that because it gives you an idea of visually what you're in store for or what's in store for you. They get to the wild boar pretty quickly, and it looks awesome how it explodes through the house. Seems really crazy. It is kind of like a shocking moment that like this boar just like pops out of nowhere and then literally like tears through the house. Like every single wall is just going down. So I really like that scene. Very cool. The only thing is, I feel like with this film in general, they backed off the boar quite a bit. I mean, the search is always going on with Jake since, the boar came and took his kid, all that jazz. But they back off the boar quite a bit. So, like, it's always there as, like, an underlying part of the story. And it's kind of what brings the whole story together because that's, Jake is looking for revenge against this boar. And Carl is looking for an answer, basically, because he wants to find out what happened to his wife. And he finds out in the end that the boar killed her. So the boar really does bring the entire story together, everyone's story together. But it doesn't feel like it plays a huge role other than that. So I kind of wanted more of the boar, but I also understand budget-wise, you can't have a ton of the boar in there, so I get it. The skepticism of locals that the boar exists sets the stage for it to be ignored and kind of more havoc starting to ensue. That happens with a lot of these types of films, and I guess it is kind of uh, able to be compared to Jaws for that reason. You know, one of those situations where people in town, well, there's one or a few people in town saying, you know, raising the alarm, saying, there's this giant boar on the loose, there's this giant boar. And then so many people are just like, yeah, you're just crazy or you're just exaggerating or whatever. And it really does set the stage to show you the mindset of everyone there and that anyone who's going after this is basically on their own. And that also leaves more room for people not addressing the issue, therefore the issue can continue, therefore there's more carnage coming, and that's what we need in these films, obviously. The introduction of Beth and Carl's relationship is to endear them to the audience, so there's more impact when things go south, meaning Beth dying. So the whole thing with like it's our anniversary coming up, and he gets her this ring, and you know all that stuff. It's to quickly endear these individuals to the audience members, so that when Beth is attacked by Benny and Dicko, which what a name by the way, and then killed by the boar eventually you feel it more. You connect more with that character, and also Carl as well, because you know Carl is left without love. Although, as we see, he finds yet another love, Sarah. Beth is so in your face with what she's doing that she draws the ire of the locals pretty much immediately. That kind of it serves kind of two purposes. One, the purpose of showing kind of where she came from and where she is covering the story, and kind of how things, you know, she's going to butt heads with people because of their different backgrounds, especially with the way she kind of bursts onto the scene, not being super sensitive to their any other cultural nuances around there. But it also sets it up to show that, you know, people aren't going to like her, people may go after her, like is the case with Benny and Dicko, but also that if she gets into a jam, people aren't going to be as likely to kind of help her out, and that also happens. Beth being attacked by the two locals, Benny and Dicko, makes you question who are the real animals here. And I think that is kind of an underlying question for the film in general, which is we have this killer boar that is the name, you know, Razorback of the film, and that's the initial focus. And in the end, there's that big kind of boss fight with it. But what is this film really about? You know, who is the real menace here? It is the boar to a degree, but to a greater degree, it's other human beings, specifically Benny and Dicko. Just saying. And when Beth thinks she's safe, the boar takes her out. And that is a good death scene, by the way, with very interesting and good sound design to it as well. Some kind of like munching noises going on in there, the little snorting of the boar, all that stuff. I did like her death scene. It was very impactful and shot very well, pretty intense. They do a good job establishing that the town where the boar roams is very remote. This makes the situation even more dire, as you know that help would end up being a long ways away. So anyone who's going to encounter the boar, the stage has been set that they're on their own for the most part, unless they brought someone with them or someone kind of happens upon it. But you see kind of how spaced out things are, how desolate stuff is, how far they are from any other civilization. So there's really not going to be any help coming. You know, there's not going to be any law enforcement or military or any of that stuff that you get in some other films. Ups the stakes, you know. The meat processing plant looks very dark, dirty, and sinister. It's very gross and creepy, and that plays greatly on screen. I mean, it looks great for that reason for a horror film, but also it helps even more because that's kind of the stage where the final showdown is between Carl and the giant boar. So it makes it look even more sinister. It makes it look even scarier, especially when you get the boar in there. But it also kind of brings through the idea of the meat processing being gross and being, you know, real dirty, dingy job that's you know, disgusting and inhumane, because that's what Beth is there to kind of the point she's trying to drive home with her news work. Dicko's laugh is hilarious, by the way. Like his laugh, kind of like a goat. I thought about trying to recreate it, but I really don't think I can. So just go to the movie and watch it if you haven't already, and just listen to his laugh. It's ridiculous. And how often it comes up. I'm just like, oh man. But it makes me laugh. It seems that Carl picks up on how Benny and Dicko hated Beth, so he chooses to distance himself from her, basically saying that he doesn't know her. He starts to question them about her to try and see if they knew anything, and then he gets the sense that they're getting a little, going on the offensive, get a little bit defensive, and then go on the offensive. So he's like, you know what? Might be smart to say that I'm not related to her. And yes, it was a smart move. I mean, even though he ends up, having Benny and Dicko come after him eventually, he does kind of stave them off for a little bit. So it was smart. It does seem crazy that Carl would spend so much time with Benny and Dicko, though, especially after this moment where he figures out that they are that there's something else going on. Like he gets that inclination. The other thing is they are immediately unhinged. Like they present as very unhinged. They do nothing to hide it. They don't care. Like they're unapologetically horrible human beings who are totally out there. And so for that reason alone, I don't understand why he was palling around with them. And then even further, like going and staying with them in like their cave living situation. I don't know what to even call it. Was it like a hideout that they go to when they're going to go out hunting, or do they actually live there all the time? I don't know. I mean, looked cool design wise for the film, but I wouldn't be going there. Carl finding out that boars couldn't swim, I thought that was gonna come in later and be like, oh, maybe they'll end up drowning this giant boar in a big body of water, but that didn't happen. So really, I didn't really understand why that was important. It wasn't. Carl's series of hallucinations, very interesting. That nightmare sequence I was talking about, that, like I said, like my favorite part of the film. Sarah and Carl are both alone in life, so you get the feeling that they'll end up being together. They do get together. I was thinking that they would get together at the end of the film, but they actually get together way sooner than that. Sarah makes a point to kind of say how she's totally alone. It's just her, and Carl tells a story about how he lost Beth and everything, and they're working together. Then they come together. Then they're a thing. So yeah. It's a different dimension to the character of Jake when Sarah reveals that he brings her live boars for tagging and tracking and studying. I did like that because prior to that, you think he's just focused on killing boars, and you just get the idea that he's just out there killing boars, but that's not the case. He actually has a softer side to him. He's mainly just going after the one giant boar who, first he's going for revenge, but I'm sure he's also going after it because he doesn't want those types of things to happen again with it out on the loose. So he needs to remedy that situation. When Carl talks about his guilt in convincing Beth to go to Australia, you actually really do feel his emotion in that moment. I think the way they set the stage, the way they shot it, the acting of it, the music they use, and kind of like the setting outside, because I think it was like when the sun was going down. It really is a well-delivered performance that you really feel that like he feels horrible and he feels guilty and like he was responsible for Beth being killed. And, as an audience member, you can then reflect on that and really just feel how terrible that is. And just be like, man, I can't even imagine. Jake's after the giant boar, but Benny and Dicko are way more of a danger. This kind of goes back to what I was saying about who is the real animal here, who is the real danger. Jake is so laser focused on going after this giant boar, the Razorback, that it's like he's almost unaware that Benny and Dicko are even a problem. And then obviously they come for him, and he ends up getting it because the biggest danger that he should have been looking out for were Benny and Dicko, who were the ones who basically set everything in motion that led to Beth being killed. Obviously the boar is the one that actually killed her, but had the boar not shown up, you get the idea that Benny and Dicko would have killed her anyway. I like how excited the locals are to go hunt a giant boar. Yeah, when they're with Sarah and they're trying to figure out the tracking of it, and she's like, oh, I pinpointed it, let's go. And like everyone grabs their guns, and they're all like hooting and hollering and yelling and jumping in their trucks and taking off. I was just like, it's kind of funny how excited they are for this. But I mean, small town in the middle of nowhere, I guess they don't get a lot of excitement. And then it's even funnier when they get there and then they find out that it was actually just like a small boar, and they're just kind of like, Oh man, no fun right now. I thought that was good. What's the purpose of the giant uh, blade on the floor in the meat plant? When I first saw it, I was like, "This is very random. It doesn't seem like by design it would actually be there." And then you find out later, oh, it's conveniently there because that is how Carl will win the fight against the boar. He gets him on that conveyor belt and kind of goads him towards him to kind of like run into it, and then he's minced meat, and the day is saved. Good thing the boar finished off Benny, because I really don't think Carl was about to do that. I mean, you could see, like, he had the gun. He was saying that he was gonna, or acting like he was gonna kill Benny, but you could tell that, like, he was having such a struggle where he was like, man, I really want to kill this guy for many reasons, but he just couldn't do it. You could see that he wasn't gonna do it. So in comes the boar to finish the job where Carl could not. When Benny is struggling with the boar, you can see that they reverse footage. They use reverse footage in it at one point. It's like when the boar kind of like bucks him up off the ground, they did like a reverse footage on that where it like goes up and then goes down, and it's exactly the same. Pay attention to that if you want to see that. You might just be like, ah, I'm good. Once you get to see the boar a good amount, you feel like you get that big payoff. It looks really gnarly, really disgusting, really creepy, really scary, and massive in scale, obviously. But you get bits of the boar for the most part throughout the film, but then that big payoff at the end where you're like full on seeing this big impressive one. That's the animatronic one, its mouth's going and everything. It's immense. Like you feel the presence at that point. Like you get this air of just like danger and just like it's a tough situation. Like I can't even imagine being in a situation like that. I mean, I had a very close encounter with wildlife before. It was a deer. It was like a full-size deer that I was walking somewhere. I came around a corner and the deer had been laying down on the ground or just around the corner in the grass. And when I came around the corner, I stopped, and the deer stood up and literally like 2 feet from me. Something much smaller like that, like you don't understand when you're that close to it how big it actually is in comparison to you and what that feels like. Because animals are unpredictable. So you really don't know what they're going to do. They don't have logic the way humans do. So in that moment, that deer could have run straight at me, and I'm glad that it didn't. It very slowly just kind of like backed away, especially because I wasn't moving. I wasn't trying to make any sudden moves. It just kind of like backed away and then turned around and walked away. But thinking, I was thinking about that while I was watching Razorback, because I was like, if that was a kind of intense situation for me, what would this be like with this giant boar? Can't even imagine. You would just probably feel like, I'm done. I'm dead. My life's over right now. Carl lost his first woman to the boar, so he's not going to lose a second woman to this boar, and that's why he has to finish the job. He doesn't want to be womanless twice. He already lost Beth. He is not going to lose Sarah to this giant boar. So it's kind of like he gets a redo in a sense. He finds love again, and he gets his redo of making sure that the boar can't end his relationship. This film is shot way better than any film about a giant wild boar has any right to be. Just want to reiterate that. I do feel that way about it, but I'm glad it's that way. Lots of fog and lots of shadow shots with intense lighting behind it. So many moments where, especially like at the nighttime, when it's just like a really intense light backlighting everything and everything's kind of like shadows. It does look cool. It looks striking. It also makes it look more intense and scary and creepy as well. So I really enjoy that. I mean, the overall atmosphere that's created for this film is outstanding. Great color palette. There's so many different colors of lighting that they end up using at different times during this. So I really like all these splashes of color that show up in the film. Just further adds to the visual experience, and this really is a visual experience. This points to the aspect of humanity that always wants to be in control of nature. That's kind of an ongoing problem with humanity in general, always feeling like they have to be in control of nature. Like that's literally what's going on here. Once there's an animal that steps outside of the bounds or kind of ends up stepping on the feet of humanity, you got to get it under control. You know, you can't let nature be uncontrolled. And you see how much control is going on when they're just going out there and they're just harvesting these kangaroos, taking them to the meat plant and, you know, getting them out for food. Um, Humanity doesn't take nature getting the upper hand well. And you can also see that with like natural disasters. That's another thing. People don't expect natural disasters to happen. They're going to happen, but every time they happen, people are just like, "Oh my God, I didn't see it coming. How could this happen?" Um, Nature's strong. Nature is strong. This also points to the human desire for revenge. That's another big part of this. Obviously, that's what Jake is fully fueled by, so much so that, like I said, he's laser focused and not seeing the true danger to him of Benny and Dicko. So, really points a lot to revenge. And then also Carl, you know, who is driven by revenge at the end, can't finish it against Benny. The boar does it for him, but then he can finish the boar. So he finally, you know, it's easier for him to take out an animal than it is for him to take out a human. And I think that's probably the case for most actual humans. But anyway, enjoyed this film. I'm glad I saw it for the first time. And out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give it a very solid 3.5-star rating. I was thinking about 3 just because of, you know, the content of the story, but the visuals are so good and it's shot so well that it's got to get that 3.5, in my opinion. Really enjoy it. So would love to hear what other people have to say about it. Go ahead and put it down in the comments. Let's talk about Razorback. Also, if you have other films kind of related to this that you want to, you know, recommend to me, I'd be interested because I do like some creature features here and there. But do me a quick favor, hit subscribe if you haven't already. That is your way to repay me if you like this video or any video I have ever done. Literally, it is quick, painless, costs you $0, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it big time. It really does keep me motivated when I keep getting new subscribers. So I'd appreciate that. Also, notification bell button, please hit that. Then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I put up a good amount. So if you could help me out and watch them as soon as you're aware that they're there, it kind of helps me gain traction if you can. Regardless, I really do thank you for taking your time to watch this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.